for it. All right, I'm Francis McCaffrey from McCaffrey Crafts. You know me, and today we have a very special guest on my YouTube channel. It's a guy by the name of Heiko, and he runs and promotes and does quite a lot within martial arts. And he's known as Highland Broadsword online. Again, he is another guy that I really am interested talking to. He's a great reputation. I have seen him and heard of him for years. He's very active online. He's built up a really good community in Germany, and I'm very proud of the way he has promoted, older types of martial arts, and I'm proud of his involvement in Irish crafts and his interest in Irish stick as well. So, with all that kind of introduction, hello Heiko, how are you?
Hello, good morning. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So Heiko, we'll start off just a few easy things. So whereabouts are you in Germany?
I'm a little bit up north of Frankfurt. So I lived very close to Frankfurt for like most of the time of my life. But last year we moved more into, on the countryside, into a rural area with lots of green and fields and forests and small villages. And I really enjoy that because I always wanted to live outside of the city. And, now being 43, I think it was time to get, into a more like a retirement area of living.
I understand. Look, I'm 44, so I understand exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not 44 yet. I can't remember. I'm born 1978. I think we're born similar years anyway.
Yeah, I was born 1979. So yeah. We're around the same generation.
Okay. Yeah, because it's usually what I find is that a lot of guys get interested in history and researching when they get into their late 30s, and when they try to have kids and families, then it's like midlife crisis. They decide, right, we're going to do something interesting now. Some guys, they buy a motorbike, but guys like me and you, we get interested in different things. So if you can tell me a little bit about a Highland Broadsword and what's that about.
So it actually started not in my midlife crisis. Already started when I was a teenager. So interest in martial arts and history was always there, and especially swordsmanship. Starting from like being a kid playing with sticks, watching night movies and pirates and musketeers and all that, and later all the martial arts movies. And therefore the interest was always there. And since my teenage times, I have the feeling I was involved with martial arts in some way, and also with history in some way, all my life. And that is how all started. And Highland Broadsword, the Facebook page, actually, it was set up by my publisher, because when I wrote my first book and was published in 2014, he gave me permission to use that Facebook page to promote not only my book, but also to promote everything around my passion about Highland Broadsword, history and martial arts, and what we do in our training group.
Okay, tell me about the first book. What was it called? What was it about?
Oh, yeah, it was called Highland Broadsword. I have it here. It was
very good.
Yeah, this is kind of the publisher has kind of a series of translations also of American or English books about longsword, about medieval furniture, about siege weapons, about all kinds of things. And he was one I offered. So this kind of cover is the standard cover of this book series. But I was very happy with that. It is the first book in German language on the topic. So that was the idea, because Chris Thompson, who founded the Cateran Society, which I am also a member of, he already wrote a lot of books on the topic. And my idea was that there are still many people out there who are interested in these things, but are not so good in reading English, or it's maybe too difficult to them, and though they like give it a pass. And so the idea was to sum up the historical martial arts around Scotland in one German volume, with also my own ideas and my own interpretations and views being into it. So it's kind of an overview, still a how-to manual, so you can use it to train with it, but what was nice is that first I made photos and they were not so good from the quality of my camera. And the publisher suggested that he has a sketch artist. And so he transferred all photos in these kind of sketches.
Oh, that's much better.
Yeah, and I like that because these sketches are still a little bit rough-ish, because that had kind of the look as period manuals had. So we're wearing obviously modern fencing mask and so on, but it looks a little bit like when you pick up Angelo or Donald McBain, and so it has a little bit this look, and I really liked it, and it was great that he was putting this work and effort still in it, because he had already hired the artist for some pictures where they were, I will have to look where it is, an example here, where they were taking sketches from the manuals, like this one from Miller, Captain James Miller, and you know, he made kind of a copy of that, yeah, because
And
he was a little, yeah.
And how long would it take you to write that book? It looks like a lot of research went into it.
The thing is, I already wrote that book over the years, because for my homepage, I made like small articles. And every time, because like martial arts and history, writing is part of my life since I am a teenager. I started, you know, trying out to write my own Star Wars fan fiction and such things first, and then I wanted to try to write the next Jurassic Park. And you know, my father was mocking me all the time, like, yeah, what's your next novel about this island with the dinosaurs, right? And but writing was already, I really like writing. It comes natural to me, and so I started to set up a homepage and started to writing little articles to explain what we are doing. And I'm not very good in writing short texts. I'm still trying to learn that. So it was more like, you know, like more like a blog. It became more like a blog. So I already had a lot of things over the years written down, and then it just made click. I wanted to write it down in a book. So I had already a lot of material, and I put it together, and then I wrote some additional chapters. So I would say the progress of really sitting down and saying, I make a book, I write a book, that was around 2-3 months. But again, the work, research, and everything came way before that over the years since I started with that.
Okay, did your interest in Highland Broadsword come from that 1980s movie Highlander? Was that when it started?
Yeah, absolutely, but more so also from the TV show Highlander, which I really enjoyed, which I still am rewatching. Yeah, I loved
watched that too.
Yeah,
it was popular. It was popular in Ireland too. I saw it.
Yeah. Here in Germany, we had it all. Had it in the TV, and it was, you know, when I was like 15, 16, 17, I watched it every time, and later I got the DVDs and, you know, watched it back and forth. So this is still my favorite TV show. And that was kind of one of the reasons, because in the flashbacks, you always see Duncan MacLeod very often having different weapons, but he is using very often the Highland Broadsword. And my first thought was always like, this is a reasonable weapon because it has hand protection, you know. Personally, many people who know me online know that I start mocking weapons with not enough hand protection, because I'm all, you know, like basket hilt and then a basket hilt. But kind of that is the reason, because I liked, of course, Scottish history. I like the setting, I like the scenery and everything. But of course, I also found that this weapon was kind of cool because it is something special in the world of swords, in my opinion.
Okay, and for someone like me who doesn't know a lot about broadsword, like how heavy it is, how long is it?
Oh yeah, I have my sharp one here. So this one is around 1.2, 1.3 kilos, something in between. But most of the weight goes down to the hilt, because of course this is a massive hilt, so it's not top heavy. So swords are, many people think, oh yeah, swords are very heavy, and generally speaking, they are not as heavy as people expect them to be. But more important than the overall weight in swords is the balance. So it's always about point of balance. Where's the point of balance? And of course, if you take an example, a so-called light cavalry saber, which is not called light cavalry saber because it's light, it's called light because it was standard equipment of the light cavalry troops. And this is very top heavy because you swing it from horseback. You have only a stirrup hilt most of the time, so like a knuckle bow, like a knuckle guard, and it has the blade gets broader towards the point because you want to cut down from horseback with a good swing and enough force. So the balance is much worse, so to speak, than compared to the overall more heavy Highland broadsword with a basket hilt. So the balance in most broadswords is like 2 fingers, 3 fingers wide from the basket hilt. So you have the point of balance around here, and that makes it really a very good and wieldy weapon. Of course, in the beginning, if you don't know anything about swordsmanship, that feels heavy. But then again, you have to, of course, to do the correct technique, because martial arts is all about technique, of course. And if you know how to use the point of balance and the point of percussion and how the balance of the weapon is distributed over all the weapon, and then you know how you do the technique. So what you can do with the Highland Broadsword is you do small motions from the wrist and a little bit from the elbow, and you can still generate powerful cuts without, you don't have to swing your arm like, like smashing and cutting and slashing like in a video game or in the movies. You can just rotate. It's called mouliner from the French word of turning, like a turning motion.
Yeah.
And this is essential for all kinds of military swordsmanship, having quick actions from the wrist. And when you're fighting without any armor, it's enough to give, like with a saber, a quick snap cut to the face that will not kill the opponent, but will wound him, and then you can go for a finishing strike. And the same is with the Highland Broadsword. So it's very well balanced, so it's not overall heavy, but you have, of course, to use the right technique.
Okay. And what about those very big swords you see Scottish guys holding? Like they're like a T-shaped, and they have to hold them with 2 hands. Are they broadswords, or are they different?
Now, generally, people call them Claymore.
Yeah.
There is a lot of discussion about the origin of the topic, and is it a Claymore if you refer to the basket-hilted broadsword, or is it a Claymore when you refer to the 2-handed sword? And some people say it's both. So the term is interchangeable, but generally speaking, the popular opinion is that Claymore, everybody knows when you say it's a Claymore, everybody knows what katana is, everybody knows what the saber is, and people have an image what is a Claymore. And again, these 2-handed swords, they are not as long as, in example, Iberian montante or German 2-handed swords from the 16th century. They are much shorter, but their blade profile is different to, in example, German medieval longswords, which are tapering quite narrow towards the point, so you can thrust and you can do all these kind of things to, put your blade into the holes of an armor. While the Scottish 2-handed swords are more like meat choppers, as I call them. So you want to cut a breach, you have a very broad and flat blade. The blade shape stays nearly as broad towards the point. Many of them are not very pointy, so you can, of course, thrust with them, but you can see these are meant to clear the way and use swings. And again, overall weight is sometimes 3, 4, maybe 5 kilos, but it's not that heavy because the weight is distributed, and when you know how to use it, it's not overall heavy. So these montantes, which are like partly 170 centimeters long, so much bigger than some users, they are much heavier, and if you know how to use the technique, they again are not so heavy to wield. And it's the same with the Claymore.
Yeah, because I watched some medieval fighting. They have this like M1 martial arts type of tournament. Yeah. And I know a lot of it is sponsored by the Russian oligarchs and stuff, but I think that I don't know if that's continuing. But some of those tournaments have 200 and 300 people running at each other in armor, and they have blunt swords. But the swords they use seem to be quite heavy, and they hold them in front of them, and it's more chopping and parrying to the sides. Is that kind of correct, or is that how
it's a different game. I never did this kind of medieval bohurt or knightly combat. There are different names. Battle of Nations is one of the biggest tournaments. But I know some guys who did it also next to historical European martial arts. And bohurt is this kind of armored sword fighting combat sport, which it is. So you have to make a difference between armored combat as it was historically speaking to kill someone, and how it was maybe done as a sport, because Bluehood was already done in the medieval times. I'm not such an expert on the medieval stuff, but that much I know. So it's kind of a similar game today. And what they do with the swords, they, as I understand it, they use the two-handed swords mostly in single combat, so one-on-one. And they fight for points. So they try to get like, quick cuts over their head. And strike, of course, they strike the armor, which is, of course, in real combat with a weapon, you want to get into the holes of the armor. You see it in the medieval armored combat manuals, you can see they hold it like a short spear, like a pike. They want to get into the holes. They use the grip to smash and whatnot. But you seldom see that someone uses a blade and smashes the armor, because the armor is there to protect you from that. So you have to get another way into the armor with heavier weapons, with like maces and axes and things like that. So in that case, I think they fence more like having the armor as protective gear and fighting for points. But then again, still some of the techniques are quite similar to what you see in fencing manuals with a two-handed sword or with a long sword. So I think it's definitely one way to have fun with a two-handed sword and to benefit from it. I think there was kind of an online flame war some years ago between the full contact armored fighting scene and the HEMA scene. Not all, but some, especially in Germany. It was crazy. It was in all martial arts forums and whatnot. And but then finally you saw some people saying, yeah, but I do both. I'm captain of the whatever team, and I'm doing historical martial arts, especially in Eastern Europe. Many people in Poland and Russia and so on, they did both, like historical fencing and the full armored, full contact fight in armor. And they said, we can learn from each other. We can, both is benefiting. When you're interested in historical medieval combat forms, and especially when using something with armored combat as well, which not many people do because an armor is very expensive to afford, to have a proper armor, then you should definitely try out this Bluehood thing. So if someone would give me an armor, borrow me an armor, and said, "Do you want to try it out?" We're like, "Yeah, of course, I would like to try it." Not with these guys who do it all the time, because they will definitely kill me in that game. Yeah, but
let me get some cardboard boxes. Will that do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's you can do different kinds of fun games in martial arts, and we always have to keep in mind, no matter what kind of sparring we do, it's always a simulation. It's always a controlled environment. It's not. I have to stop my dog. Aus. She's trying to play with me, and she's grabbing my wrist, so I have to get up. Nine.
That's okay. That's good. It's good. It humanizes you that you have a nice dog as well. But I have a question about. I was wondering, because when I used to read these stories about these medieval battles and sword fighting and things like that, they would say they lasted for hours and for days. But with the armor and with the swords, like after 2 minutes, you're going to be so tired. So do you think these battles lasted that long when they were in combat, or what is your opinion? Because the energy that you use, you have to be almost like a Superman, because it's so heavy. Like,
I think we have to keep several things in mind. First of all, battlefield reports can often be, when they are historical, they can often be exaggerated. So sometimes when we hear stories about battles somewhere, like before Christ, there's a lot of exaggeration sometimes. It's not always 100% of the truth, and sometimes people wrote about it who were not even there. So that is one thing. On the other hand, of course, a battle is not constant fighting all the time. So it's not, like tactics and going back and forth and, positioning your troops and all these things. And the third thing is the armor is, generally speaking, not that heavy. Again, as with swords, people think like, okay, a knight who falls from his horse is completely helpless. He's like, like a bark landing on its back, and that is not true. So they were doing. There's one guy in Switzerland, I think he is also a historian, and he knows a lot about medieval armor and armored combat, and he did like an obstacle course with full armor. So a Swiss standard obstacle course together with I think it was a soldier of the Swiss army and a firefighter, and they had to cross different obstacles. And the aus. She is fighting, so she wants to fight.
That's okay. You can bring your
Yeah.
dog on. You can show the dog if you want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but she would start fighting up here, so it would be all the time like, you know, people see me here trying to get her away. But if she
That's
behaves, maybe she will get some attention from the camera later. So
maybe maybe
yeah.
she saw your collar and elbow videos and she just wants to get involved because
Yeah.
I saw that you got
Yeah.
some interest in collar and elbow recently.
Yeah. We'll come to back to that later. But what I want to talk about the armor is that
Yes.
the obstacle course, I think the firefighter won because he is very used to crawl with heavy equipment through spaces and whatnot from the time. But the guy in armor, who's not like a trained professional, he won the obstacle course against the soldier because the soldier has all his weight of equipment distributed mostly to his back, to his backpack, and armor is over your body. So of course it might be 25, 30, maybe 40 kilos. But it's distributed all over your body. And of course, people who could afford good armor, like complete Milanese plate armor, they of course had very good armorers who made them perfectly fitting to their proportions. So it was like wearing very heavy clothes. So they made also experiments, I think, in France, where they were recreating things like climbing up a ladder, doing like a front roll, and all kind of gymnastics, which you can also see on medieval old pictures, which they are doing in full armor, and it worked. And now we have to keep in mind a knight back then would be next to a warrior, of course, many different other things, but he would be a professional trained warrior. So he was growing up all his life to train this. So he would be even more used to that. And the average HEMA guy who has some armor can already do these things. So of course, it would be exhausting. I know that we fight regularly in our HEMA protective gear, so like with fencing masks and heavy padding and all that things. And of course, it gets exhausting. And nobody can like fight for 2 hours in a row. That's too much. But generally speaking, you can fight much longer. And it's not like, okay, 1 cut, 2 cut, it's over. You win. Yeah, no. People were trained back then, and they still you can see that it works in armor as well.
Okay, and how did you get an interest in Irish stick fighting, Irish blackthorn and shillelaghs and cudgels and things like that? How did that start?
That already started around the same time. Back then, when I was becoming interested in historical European martial arts, I was looking for Scottish broadsword first. And then automatically, because I was not only interested in Scotland, I was also interested in Ireland. Very quickly, I stumbled over Irish blackthorn online, and also over, I think it was back then, John Hurley's book, Shillelagh, the Irish fighting stick, was one of the first books on HEMA which I bought online. And therefore, this interest came automatically because later, when I did more research on the topic, and get more into it, and decided to do historical European martial arts as my one and only main martial art. So I did 10 years of kendo, so Japanese fencing. But during that, I already started to get an interest in European swordsmanship and all that things. And so it was already there for me in the beginning. So I was already looking into that and picked up what I can find. And Scottish and Irish history are very much connected, of course. We see that in the Gallow Glass mercenaries, in example. We can see that in how they fought, what weapons they used, and so on and so on. Even the clothes, even the language, and so on and so on. Though the two nations are very much connected. And back then, I think there were even more, especially through the sea passage between Ireland and Scotland. So from the Hebrides and the Western Highlands, there were like centuries of exchange. And I think Irish people and Scottish people are still arguing about if the Irish brought hurling to Scotland and the Scottish called it Shinty, I think, then, and doing something similar, or if Shinty
Of
came
course.
from Scotland to Ireland and the Irish started to call it hurling.
Oh no, of course you're talking to an Irishman, so we're going to
Yeah, of
claim
course.
ownership of that.
Yeah, yeah. You know that hurling was way before that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there's stories like of Cuchulainn and the Hound, and shooting the Slitter into, so there's loads of like historical references to it, and especially talk about the Gallowglasses. They were like mercenaries and considered like almost the most elite warrior that were hired by the Irish elite and kings and stuff to protect them. And what can you tell us about the Gallowglass? Like, what type of weapons did they use?
Well, the Gallowglass always are mostly referred to be axemen, so two-handed long spart axes. In the 16th century, they were nearly like halberds, so really very, very long. And most likely they came from the Norse influence in Scotland, when especially on the Western Islands and the Highlands, Western Highlands, many Vikings, Norse people settled, and over kind of a longer period, both societies melted into one. So you can see in the weapons of early medieval times in Scotland, you see a lot of influence, which is Viking or Norse in the design. And that was for the two-handed axe. So it came from the so-called Dane axe the Vikings like to use. And as far as I know from what I researched so far, that in Scotland, until the 15th century, West Highland warriors were mostly referred to be axemen, with two-handed axes, but also with hand axes and shield. And their complete appearance was still very like an echo of the Viking period. They had these the Highland, Western Highland galley. I forgot the name right now. How they were called. They were still used also in Ireland in the 16th century. So Grace O'Malley is a famous pirate queen. She used kind of the same boats. So these were also an echo from the Viking longboat from back then. And the same was with the axe. So Gallowglass were mostly seen as heavy infantry, as shock troops, as special guards using two-handed axes. But of course, they had also one-handed swords and later two-handed swords and spears and all kind of different weapons. But their main weapons, the references are mostly that they were axe fighters.
Okay. And have you been doing some research into collar and elbow recently? Because I saw you trying to do some of that in your videos, and it was very interesting. You have a very good YouTube channel, which, don't worry, I'll put a link at the end anyway for this, for people to check you out.
Yeah, thank you. We it's with the YouTube channel. It started first as an exchange tool to show my training videos to my superior instructor, Chris Thompson from the Cateran Society, so he can check if we do all right. And later it evolved into a real YouTube channel. Kind of one day I woke up and I was like, oh damn, I'm a YouTuber now. How did that happen? Yeah, but I like to share my research. I like to share where we stand, and it's also material not only for people in the Cateran Society, it's also for everyone. And therefore, of course, recently we started to do collar and elbow wrestling because first of all, I was always interested in unarmed combat as I was in armed combat and weaponry. And all kinds of wrestling comes kind of natural to me. It's interesting. I'm not much of a kicker. Yeah. So I'm more like, grappling is the thing I really enjoy. I'm not the best guy in grappling, but I like it. I'm an enthusiast. And of course, the traditional wrestling styles of Scotland, like backhold wrestling, or also in England, like Cornish jacket wrestling, and so on and so on. When you look in 18th, 19th century references, you stumble over this all the time. So it was a great deal back then, and still is practiced today in some regions. And Irish collar and elbow wrestling came up thanks to Ruadan McFadden. He's originally a grappling BJJ guy, and because he's Irish but he lives in Germany, he's started to research on that topic more and more, because others did before him already, but then it declined again, and now he picked up the pieces and started his own research, and it's really, really good. And he said, okay, we will never recreate it as it was 100%, like historical martial arts with how-to manuals that are existing, but kind of, like a recreation, basing on the research and basing on techniques, which are, here comes the dog.
Hey,
and
I do love
basing
dogs.
basing on techniques that are also kind of universal. And what's interesting is, when you look at Scottish backhold wrestling and also other traditional wrestling styles from England, Scotland, and also Ireland, when you see the Irish collar and elbow wrestling, many of the terms for the trips and throws are nearly identical to each other, are kind of done the same way, nearly identical. And there are a lot of references to swordsmanship manuals. Like, an example, the back heel. The back heel is a totally common technique. Many people know it in modern grappling as well under different names, but the back heel is a technique you find in collar and elbow wrestling and backhold wrestling and elsewhere. And you find it also in old pugilism, so the old boxing, and you find it under the same name in swordsmanship manuals with a Highland Broadsword. And of course, it's done a little bit different because you have, a sword in hand and not a special grip. But generally speaking, it's the same thing. You put the leg behind the leg of your opponent, and then you trip him over and he falls on his back. That's the idea. And that is what fascinated me. And of course, it was a good thing. Rudin lives not too far away from us. And so we set up and make like a workshop, and me and my guys get hooked. We were already doing Scottish backhold wrestling before that, and we thought this is really a good way to, first of all, it's a jacket style, so you have a jacket to hold, so it's something a little bit different, and it's a good way to support our training in backhold wrestling and also in swordsmanship. So it was a great addition to say, that's really cool to do that.
Okay. Another thing too is that I'm from a place in Ireland called County Kerry, as you know, and the stick fighters in County Kerry, they were famous for using two sticks, a shorter one with a longer one. But as with most things in Irish history, there's no direct line to the technique. But you have been looking at that recently, and I was very interested in your video that you did, thinking about what was the technique, and you're applying your knowledge and your martial arts history and your study to it, and I found that very interesting. So what do you think about the two-handed stick fighting that was from Kerry? What was your opinion on that?
Well, I'm still in the progress of researching and trying things out. I'm a guy, I like to see, okay, we have some references about this or that.
Yeah,
I want to try out if that works. An example, we did have one reference of an Admiral Lord Cochrane, who is said to have instructed his sailors to put before battle a bayonet alongside their forearm, wrap this, and use it together with a cutlet as kind of a shield, but also with that pointing out to thrust people. This is one short reference. We don't know how they exactly did it. We don't know if it was very common, but I said, we have cutlasses, we have bayonets, we have some rope. Let's try this out in sparring. And hey, cool, it works. I'm not knowing if they did 100%, but we know how they use the cutlass. So we know how to use a cutlass. We know how to use a shield. We have references from that. And many principles are universal. So let's try this out. And the same is with the stick. I like the short sticks. I don't have it here at the moment. It's upstairs. I forgot it, but I have a longer stick here. I like the short cudgels, right? Oh, this is also a beautiful one.
this is a nice one. This is a nice one. I'm going to be putting up. I'm holding back a few of these to put up now after this interview, because I made a load of these little shorter ones that I'm going to put up with this interview.
Yeah, great. I like the shorter ones because they, it's your all day cudgel. And this the longer one, I really use it mostly for hiking because I like hiking, but it's also a good fighting weapon. And what I found interesting about the two sticks is that many interpretations back then were, they had two sticks. So you see documentaries about the faction fights, they have two long walking sticks.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit unpractical, especially when you consider how most of the Irish styles were using it. This half grip and, protecting your forearm with this and so on and so on. And I thought, okay, if you have two sticks like that doesn't seem very practical.
Exactly,
from a general martial perspective. So I like the interpretation and the ideas of some that they had a shorter stick together with a longer stick. And that is something which we can find all over Irish and Scottish history in swordsmanship, because what we know is that Scottish Highlanders, but also the Irish, were very like to use the sword in one hand and the long dirk or scian, which is kind of the same weapon in Ireland, so the long dagger, alongside the forearm. Okay, as kind of a make like like an emergency shield. So
Yes.
you have this. You can use this similar to what I told you about the bayonet strapped to your forearm. You have something to protect your forearm, and you have your sword. And in Ireland, it seems to have been even more common than in Scotland, because it's one interpretation that we often see Irish warriors from the 15th and 16th century in sketches where they have on their left hand an armored glove. And many people are asking, yeah, but they have open hilt swords, these Irish ring pommel hilt swords,
Yeah.
which are not with a basket hilt. Why they are not having the protective, on the sword hand, or they cannot be all left-handed, and the pictures are not all the wrong way around.
That's why the Irish lost those battles. They're not known for.
No, but one interpretation is that maybe they had the padded or the armored glove on the left hand, and they could use their dirk here, because you have to consider, if you hold have a dagger here, your hand is unprotected. Okay, so you have to take care, if you parry, to not get your hand. You cannot just stick out your hand and parry that. You have to pull it up and bend behind it and use it very carefully. But when you have an armored glove on the same hand, then of course this is much easier. And I was thinking, in my interpretation of the double stick fight, why not having the short cudgel hold here alongside your forearm, just to protect your head. And we can see this in, as I said, as the Irish used the scian, as the Scottish used the dirk together with the sword. We can also see this in a way how Lieutenant Pringle Green, he was serving in Trafalgar. He was a lieutenant of the British Navy. How he is advising people to use a sea pistol. So you take it here on the butt. So again, it's a universal principle, an idea many people had. And I think that is kind of a very good way to have it, to protect your head. But it's only one interpretation. It worked in sparring. As I said, I like to try things out in sparring, and it held up quite well. I did not came into my own way with the longer stick. I could protect my head with that. Still, I had to take care of the hand, of course, but it worked okay. Another interpretation is that the shorter sticks were maybe not so short, so that you still could have them like so, with a little bit of cudgel here, and still it was long enough to protect your forearm. And then you could also use it to, hit someone in the face and to parry. Maybe it was this way. Probably, maybe, it could also be that, as we can see, different people had different sticks and there were different styles to use it. Maybe people use double stick a different way. Recently, a friend, I think you know him also from online, Elias. He's also a very good wrestler, and he's also making his own sticks. And he had the idea, so maybe similar to Zulu stick fighting, where they have kind of a long stick with a little bit of hand protection, and then they have these cudgels to maybe they used a long stick and then used this like a shield to parry, and then I had the walking stick or a cudgel to fight, to use it as a weapon. So a longer stick, more like a hiking stick, as a shield, and then a short cudgel. And I said, this sounds also interesting. Next chance, maybe this weekend I will have the chance in training to try this out, taking a longer stick together with a cudgel. Personally, I think the answer is what worked back then for people worked. So they did what worked for them. So as you said in your video, some factions preferred shorter cudgels. Some factions even preferred not blackthorn, but I think it was ash, right?
Yeah, Limerick,
yeah. And some liked more this kind of walking stick, and maybe some liked heavier sticks, some liked lighter sticks. So I guess even with swords, where you say, okay, this is a Highland broadsword, but not every Highland broadsword is all the same. Later manufactured military weapons, they were standard, but personal weapon of your personal choice, they are so different, so little details, which are basing on the taste of the user, what he wants to have for his
Exactly.
fighting style. And I think with the sticks, it is probably the same. So for me, so far, this kind of interpretation with the shorter cudgel protecting the forearm like a dirk, like a dagger, that worked so far quite nice. But
Your
probably also
mindset.
because I'm used to that. Yeah.
Yes, your mindset, your mindset, in your opinion, is exactly what I agree with. I think that people have to look at this and take references from all around Europe, because for me, it's very obvious that stick fighting had a correlation to swordsmanship as well. Okay, it's very clear to me as well from reading that, there's no one correct way of doing it. Like, some guys will have shorter sticks, some guys will have longer sticks, some guys will be tall, some will be strong. So they will usually pick a weapon that gives them an advantage. So one of the things that I've kind of reading is that the Irish were always trying to get an advantage or cheat in fights, anything that gave them an advantage. So whenever everyone was using one stick out of Tipperary and Cork and Limerick, the Kerry guys were like, no, we'll have two sticks because that will give us an advantage. And these were wild times, and people were using it. But there's always a bit of a debate about, did fencing influence stick fighting? Like, I would tend to think it did, because there was like fencing schools around Dingle that have been referenced, and there are some things as well. But like, I think that when many people debate this, that the answer to everything could be correct. Like, it just depends on the area and on the person. And I think that's the approach. But what I really want to just emphasize there, and why people should check out your channel and definitely spend some time getting to know it, is that you have a very objective and logical approach to looking at this. You look at your research, then you actually try it. You are not one of these guys that just reads a book. You will actually try these techniques. You will see if they are practical. And I really was drawn to that with your channel. I think it's very important to have people like you, Heiko, who are trying things, who are trying to figure it out, who are trying to piece it together. Because the truth is, there is no real direct line to the techniques. There's only some pictures, some references. Now, in Irish culture, we exaggerate, we make up things. It's a very common trait throughout Irish history. We are storytellers. We will exaggerate stories for many reasons. But when I see real martial artists like you, who have been over 25, 30 plus years studying this, and you are applying, right, how is this, how would have this been hold, I'd love to encourage that type of community. And you already have a big community, and I hope it gets bigger and bigger. And we need more. You're still a young man like me, and more people need to have a think about this, to start practicing with sticks, to be thinking about things. And I'm sure that a lot of what you're saying there is correct. To me, like, your theory about how it was holding and how you've seen these pictures, to me that makes perfect sense. I think that would be a very likely like theory, that how people was holding them. So I'm very interested in always talking to martial artists, and especially guys like yourself that have credibility. You've written a book, you've been doing this for a number of years, you've established a community in Germany, and your community is just going to get bigger and bigger from my perspective. And so what we might do now is we might just kind of like finish up here for today.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure having you on. We've only just barely scratched the surface, but I want to have you back definitely as a regular guest, because we
Would
can
be my
do
pleasure.
different.
Yeah.
From today, you've given me so many questions. Like, I want to know about the sword makers. I want to know. I have so many questions to you, and we can definitely do that. But so is there anything you want to kind of promote, or to my community, or anything you want to tell my channel members?
Well, come over to my channel and visit it.
Please do.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and all the YouTube things you have to say. Yeah, but again, as I'm saying, I'm never claiming to have all the answers and to know everything, but I'm always happy to try out everything. So if you want to fight with me with a towel and a knife, then we can do that. Okay, maybe not naked for YouTube, because then, but you know what I mean. I'm a guy. I like to try things out, and this is always my approach, and I like to share it. And so I'm happy about every visitor, and also from YouTube comments, I always get new ideas. So
Exactly.
the channel and my own knowledge and experience is always growing. I met so many people online, great people like you. I learned so much from your channel. I have an example, your
Works both ways.
your faction fights series you made,
Oh
which
yeah.
I hope will maybe go on at some point in the future.
I will. I want to, but
yeah.
no one watched it. Only you, I think, when I did it.
No, it was great, and I even took downloaded the videos and turned them into MP3 so that I can listen to that like a podcast or audiobook while I'm driving. So it's really interesting. I always like to learn from others, and I'm always happy to share my knowledge. I mean, this is what made historical European martial arts so great, was the use of the internet as a tool to connect with people, to exchange. And so always new ideas come up. And I think the best way is to always learn, and be open-minded for new ideas, especially when it comes to historical or maybe even lost martial arts from back then. And nobody has all the answers. So, but I try to give some answers, or at least some ideas. So that's the best thing I can do. Share what I do in written and also with the videos. So yeah, come over, have a look.
Heiko,
And then, yeah.
you're a gentleman. You're doing a great service. You're being very useful to pass on your knowledge. In this crazy world we live in, we need more people like you. And it's been a pleasure having you on my channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.